Joe Allen joins me. Joe Allen is actually in the war room. Joe, we got a couple of powerhouse guests. I really appreciate you pulling this together on a Friday afternoon before Memorial Day. Let's go ahead. You've got a cold open. Let's go ahead and play it. Then you bring it back in and let's let it rip.
AI. In 10 years, how is life going to be different because of AI for just a normal person?
Well, 10 years is a long time. In 10 years, probably AI could do anything better than a human can, cognitively. Probably almost, I think in 10 years, based on the current rate of improvement, AI will be smarter than the smartest human. There will also be a massive number of robots.
How real is the prospect of killer robots annihilating humanity?
20% likely, maybe
Wow.
10%.
On what time frame?
5 to 10 years.
So soon, like you see a world where that's possible.
Yeah, but I mean, you could look at it like the glass is 80 to 90% full, meaning like 80% likely will have extreme prosperity for all.
Sounds like a deal with the digital devil to me. We have covered artificial intelligence now for over 4 years. The discussion has ranged from more mundane problems like people relying on chatbots to get them around the digital information sphere and maybe even getting lost and killed in the wilderness because they've allowed their algorithm to lead them astray. There are also obviously much more significant risks. You have the open declaration that these machines will ultimately replace every human white-collar and blue-collar worker. And then the nightmarish possibility that a super intelligent AI would be created and perhaps wipe out the entire human race. One thing that we haven't talked about much because there really hasn't been much headway in the political arena is concrete policy proposals for how to deal with this. Here to speak about that is Mark Beall. Mark Beall is the president of government affairs at the AI Policy Network. He is a former policy director on AI for the Pentagon, also a successful tech executive and a startup entrepreneur. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Hey, Joe. I'm doing great. Thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you very much for being here. So what is your work at the AI Policy Network, and what sorts of concrete policies are you advocating for right now?
Yeah, so the AI Policy Network is primarily focused on accelerating national preparedness for very powerful artificial intelligence capabilities, what the industry calls artificial general intelligence. And we have a number of ongoing conversations with members of Congress on various things that can be done. But right now, in terms of preparedness, we're really focused on helping the United States government understand at a more fundamental level what the specific current threats are, and then looking right around the corner where they're going through what we call a robust classified testing and evaluation regime. And we think unless the United States government itself has a strong understanding of these issues, it's unlikely that they're going to be able to take action in sufficient time to stave off what might be some of these more potentially catastrophic issues.
Now, you helped prepare the action plan with Gladstone AI. And if you would, just run us through some of the really key points of that report.
Sure. So during that work with the United States government, what we sort of concluded was that this phenomenon called deep learning, this technique that's being used today in the industry, we sort of saw the very first commercial applications of this deep learning capability coming online in 2012, and we saw as researchers and engineers were pouring more and more compute resources into these models, they were getting powerful and more powerful and more powerful. And what we concluded was that the trend here is unlikely to abate anytime soon. And because there's sort of no law of physics that caps intelligence at human level, we are expecting that these systems may become vastly superhuman and with vastly superhuman capabilities. And so, as we say in the report, these systems might actually be something a little bit more similar to like nuclear weapons in terms of their power and impact on global security.
A lot of the conversation around this threat of out of control artificial superintelligence, it seems to, as far as concrete policy goes, it seems like the only real option is either to let her rip or to put a hard cap on how much compute can go into this, how great of capabilities can be developed. Are you on that sort of wavelength of we should stop this, we should pause AI until we have a real plan, or what is your position on that?
Yeah, I think when people say we should pause AI, I think naturally a lot of other folks might question, well, what about China? What is China going to do here? And actually, Joe, what I like to say is there's sort of actually two separate races between the United States and China as it pertains to AI. The first race is the race for commercialization and diffusion, and this is a race that America probably needs to accelerate. This is a race that American infrastructure gets deployed first, and it's most capable, and that all of these countries and partners around the world are using our technology and building on top of that, and that's going to give us a really important means by which we can imbue our values, American founding principles, in the deployment of this technology. But then there's this other race, and this is the race to as you mentioned earlier in your introduction, the race to artificial superintelligence. And that is a potentially very dangerous circumstance. And that race, if we get to a point in which we are starting to see, and we already are at very preliminary levels, these models behaving in sort of deceptive ways or sort of unexplained ways, and they start to have very robust capabilities across a whole bunch of different domains, and it's looking like human beings can't steer them effectively and reliably, and then I think the United States government was going to have really no choice but to hit the brakes a little bit. And that's why we might be actually quite lucky to have President Trump in office, because it's going to take a master negotiator to be able to deal with the Chinese on this issue and make the Chinese understand as well that it might be in nobody's interest to continue to push forward and race ahead and potentially drive the entire human race off a giant cliff.
The thinker in this realm, Eliezer Yudkowsky, had a couple of years back recommended, and he joined on with the kind of pause AI movement, but on a much more extreme footing. He had recommended that an international treaty should be forged to block the development of such a dangerous system, even upon penalty of airstrikes on data centers. Steve is going to be jumping in with us soon. Steve was quite enthusiastic about such a plan. We only have about a minute and a half left, but just in that, what do you think of that sort of thing? Would it come to that?
Well, God, I hope not. No one wants to see war unleashed as a result of an uncontrolled, development of potentially dangerous capabilities. And while I think planning is always prudent, preparedness is always prudent, there is still a little bit of uncertainty about the speed at which this is moving and the trajectory and the actual threat. And so I think we're going to want to make sure that we get our arms around the actual issue. And, when we saw, like, for example, the Senate Commerce Committee hearing on AI a few weeks ago, the kind of main news coming out of that was a 10-year moratorium on state regulations. And normally that might be okay, but as as Elon's telling Senator Cruz, that 10-year period is about when these machines might start to get, pretty dangerous. And I think we have to have a hard conversation in Congress to get our arms around this issue and actually develop our own position on what the threat actually is. And until we do that, we're going to be kind of shooting in the dark.
Yeah, absolutely. The moratorium, in my opinion, is completely absurd, especially when you have so many people who are advocating for states' rights and even advocating for things like the making marijuana completely illegal in Texas while simultaneously pushing for a ban on state-level regulation. We're going to go to break. We'll be right back with Mark Beall.
Welcome back. Beall, answer me this. This thing about the states is absolutely hugely important. How could they just slide it in to a reconciliation bill with essentially no debate on something that's so important, particularly those of us who believe in federalism, states' rights? This may be the most important topic of our time. How does that happen, brother?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but there's probably hundreds of millions of dollars sloshing around Congress, from the industry, and I think candidly, the industry has a sort of a fair grievance here. There are like 5,000 or so state level bills. Many of them are not very technically informed, but I think at the same time, when you have a situation in which the Vatican has moved faster to appreciate the significance of this moment than the United States Congress, to ask states to hold off for a period of 10 years while Congress sort of continues to navel gaze is probably not an appropriate ask for states and their responsibilities to help defend their citizens.
I say you need more. There's more regulation to open a nail salon or hair braiding salon on Capitol Hill than there is of the top four folks chasing artificial general intelligence. Is that going to change? Is that because the industry's just flooded the zone with money, and what they want is kind of laissez-faire and devil catch the hindmost in this?
Yeah, I think there's certainly this desire to accelerate to the brink and go as far and as hard and as fast as we can. And there are many amazing people in this industry, including many of the top leadership. And I think they'll say they all feel locked in this race to be first to build this capability. And as a result, they feel almost like they've lost a little bit of their own agency. And at the same time, though, each one of these executives has sort of made a claim that AI may in fact be incredibly dangerous, and some of them have gone so far as to hunker down and buy their own 100-acre farms. But unfortunately for the rest of us, like most Americans can't afford a 100-acre farm to hunker down from a sort of a self-inflicted potential catastrophe. And I think this is something that's probably worth a little more congressional scrutiny. Like, how is it that these folks can make these claims and then proceed like as if everything's normal, and Congress, is not really taking this seriously? And it's something that I struggle to understand, Steve.
Um, Talk to me about. We just talked about the Latin Mass. Talk to me about. We've got a connection on this. I know you're very interested in and obviously a practitioner of the Tridentine Rite. Talk to me about our connection through the Latin Mass.
Yeah, so I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and I attended St. Joseph's Catholic Church. And it turns out my catechism teacher was one Marty Bannon. So your father was my Sunday school teacher for many, many years, and he was an absolutely wonderful man. And the priest who was presiding at that church, Father Adrian Harmoning, the late Father Adrian, was very close to my grandfather and a mentor of mine, and helped me get into Benedictine Military High School, where I believe your father also attended. And so, I think Benedictine might be the only Catholic military day school in the United States. It's been around since 1911. And yeah, it's a really small world, isn't it, Steve?
Actually, my father was one of the founders of St. Joseph Latin Mass and very close to Father Adrian, but it was myself and my two brothers that went to Benedictine. We
Oh,
needed that.
okay.
My father didn't. He was always
Gotcha.
he was already a pretty straight shooter. So that we had to go to Benedictine to get our minds right. I want to hold you, if you don't mind, can we hold you into the 6 o'clock hour for a
Sure.
moment? Because I know Joe has got a thing, and this is since you worked at the Pentagon, you're in this organization now. There can't be a more this issue of the singularity, not just artificial intelligence, but CRISPR and everything we're hurtling towards, Homo sapiens on this side and Homo sapien plus. It's really the biggest issue of our age, and it's not getting enough coverage. One of the reasons not getting enough coverage, the money doesn't want it to get coverage. Okay, they want to throw capital at it and let all these companies just kind of run for the big brass ring of who's going to get to artificial general intelligence first. And the policy implications, the cultural implications, the civilizational implications. Look, it's got huge, tremendous upside, but it is also some terrible, terrible downsides that we don't actually think this thing through. Friday, 23 May, year of our Lord 2025. Thank you for sticking around for the second hour of our late afternoon, early evening edition of War Room. Special announcement, 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, not 10, 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, Eastern Daylight Time. We will be live. We'll be going to the United States Military Academy at West Point. Steve Gruber will be there with the RAV crew. We're going to have all 3 hours. The graduation exercise for the cadets will start President Trump commander-in-chief is going to address the cadets, and then give out diplomas. And the commissions of these cadets will come shortly thereafter. Captain Mo Bannon will be up there, new member of the Board of Visitors, and we'll be checking in throughout the day. So 9 a.m. tomorrow morning till noon, live coverage of the graduation at West Point. And then on Monday, 10 a.m. To noon, we'll be covering the ceremony, the commemoration at Arlington National Cemetery for the honored dead of the United States military. And Patrick K. O'Donnell will be my wingman for both days. Joe Allen's my wingman now. Mark Beall's our guest. Mark, also, I just want to make sure people understand the little parish that your parents and my parents and these, they're classic deplorables, right? Just working class, good folks, very humble. With Father Adrian started this little parish of St. Joseph that has really expanded because of so many vocations, so many young people in the military, just great, great folks, the backbone of the country. This is the parish that the Richmond office of the FBI started their investigation because Steve Bannon's parents were involved in it. And as you know, my dad is as close to a saint as you can get, just a kind, humble man. They investigated because Steve Bannon was associated with that parish. This is the kind of depravity at the FBI. And when I was a kid in that parish of St. Paul's at the time, back in the 50s and 60s, the most revered people in the parish were the FBI agents. We had a couple of FBI agents that everybody in the parish looked up to. That's not the FBI today. How shocking is that they investigated for extremism? This was a breeding ground. You know the folks that go there. This is a breeding ground for extremism, sir.
Steve, I wasn't particularly politically aware or active until that happened. In fact, maybe I could even have said that I was sort of burying my head a little bit in the sand. But once they kind of come for you, it's sort of hard not to pay attention. I just remember my late grandmother, who I was very close with, and her little shawl and her rosary, kneeling to take communion, and to hear the FBI was potentially engaged there was a very shocking, I think, experience for me, and completely not consistent with what I know the great men and women of the FBI, swore the oath of the Constitution to protect the country. That never seemed like something that they would ever do.
No, pretty shocking, particularly given you and all the young people that came out of there and went in the military, went to build businesses. Is just incredible. Joe Allen, we got a couple more questions for Mark before we let you go. Really thank you for coming in, sir, given everything you got on your plate. Joe Allen, take it away.
Yeah, Mark, we talk a lot about the religious implications of artificial intelligence in general, but also artificial general intelligence and superintelligence, this concept basically of a digital god. I don't want to put you on the spot too much with in regards to your own belief, but if you could speak to the spiritual aspect of this, the religious aspect of this, and the struggle against these kind of Silicon Valley, maybe you could say transhumanists, post-humanists, and the aims that they have. How do you personally, if you care to speak to that, see this in religious terms, or just your involvement in the church in general, the statements from Pope Leo XIV? How do you see religious communities responding to this?
I think if you look at the culture coming out of Silicon Valley, some of the people that are building this technology are not only atheists, but potentially even hostile to religious people. And I think when you hear the public statements that are made, how AI will make humanity no longer essential, or AI we should be planning for succession and handing the keys of the kingdom over to AI, and ultimately this goal of building the digital god to usher in an era of immortality. And by the way, these aren't things that I necessarily think or believe. It's just what the folks that are building this technology themselves have been saying over the last 10 years. I think it's hard for people of faith to not kind of be grabbed by the lapels and confront this potentially very hostile series of developments that could affront people of religious faith. And I remember back in my time Benedictine, we had to write this essay on freedom. I was a senior in high school on 9/11, and freedom was sort of the talk of the day. And as long as people had the freedom to choose the good in the world, and I worry about a future in which not only are people no longer able to choose the good, but potentially no longer able to choose many things at all, whether that be how they derive their income. And by the way, you hear folks talking about ideas around universal basic income, and they promise this utopia. Sure. But I tell you, folks who have studied history know that every time someone makes a claim about utopia, it ends in one place, and that place is the gulag. But I also think there could be this technology could bring about a tremendous amount of benefits for people, especially if we don't have to go all the way to the superintelligence that some people want to build, and focus in on improving the quality of life for all Americans, improving healthcare. But we'll have to sort of think very carefully. And I think we saw a letter from some evangelical Christian leaders sent to the president just a few days ago, urging the president to take some of these issues much more seriously and ensure that those folks have a seat at the table as important policy choices are made. And the last thing I'll mention, Joe, here on this one is that the idea of AGI, artificial general intelligence, this capability might be happening as soon as while President Trump is in office. And so as we sort of think about what's coming right around the corner, the people of our country, I think, need to get a lot more engaged, calling their members of Congress, expressing concern, and otherwise being activated on this one. Because I think, as Steve made, this is perhaps the most important test of certainly of our lifetime, if maybe not even of human history. And I know that sounds a little fantastical, but I really believe that it might be true.
Well, just listening to the people like Mark Andreessen, Sam Altman, Larry Page, Demis Hassabis, just the vision of creating this digital god itself, even if it's not necessarily plausible technically, although I definitely do not dismiss the possibility, that belief system has to be focused on, and in my opinion, especially when it comes to total human replacement or human extinction as a goal. It has to be excised from the culture. Real quick, too, that's Johnny Moore, and the ChristianAIletter.org, I believe, is the open letter that Mark Beall just mentioned. We had Max Tegmark on in the last few days, and he, I think, echoes a lot of your sentiments as far as the positive potentiality of AI and avoiding the negative. I myself, I got to say, speaking to you guys, I always have to suppress my Luddite instincts so that I don't come in as a big party pooper. But I really do appreciate at least the real conscience in what you guys are doing. So, Mark, if you would, just please tell us where we can find you. Tell us where we can find out about your work at the AI Policy Network, and what sorts of things you guys are going to be doing in the near future.
Yeah, so we're going to continue our campaign, our guerrilla campaign on Capitol Hill and with the public to try to get the message out and try to just help folks understand that what's happening in this field and help Congress navigate this issue on as best they can on behalf of the country and fulfillment of their duties under the Constitution. You guys can find me on Twitter, Mark Beall, and at the AIPN.org. We're always looking for supporters and for folks to help us with our mission. So if you'd like to get more involved, please do feel free to reach out and say hi, and we'd be delighted to chat.
Okay, Mark Beall, thank you very much. Look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a wonderful day. And I'd like to say happy Memorial Day and especially call out a Benedictine colleague, Nick Kervin, USMC, who died in Afghanistan. We miss you, Swervin' Kervin.
Wow. Unbelievable. That's the weekend we commemorate these fallen heroes, the honored dead of the American military. Thank you so much, Mark Beall. And Benedictine generated some great leaders, really fantastic institution.